Sugarland Libra, I'm Medicine, and this is my medicine wheel. And we are going to be doing a read for you for the period happening between September 23rd to October 3rd, and that is the first official trimester period of Libra. Happy equinox, happy autumn equinox. Um, you know, this trimester, I mean, the autumn equinox has a lot to do with fall. And, just thinking about the symbolism behind fall, I mean, you think about the trees, you think about color, you think about the trees maybe turning different colors, the leaves rather turning different colors and fading away. They're no longer, the chlorophyll is no longer there um, to keep the leaves green, and so they turn into these beautiful earthly colors and they fall off the tree. And this has a lot to do with the idea of falling. It has a lot to do with death. It has a lot to do with release. It has a lot to do with letting go. So the West, it's in the West. Autumn is the season of the West, and it's all about letting things fall away, letting all the green good, all of that good stuff that you had. It's all about letting it fall away, just as the leaves fall off the tree. The West has a lot to do with loss, and it has to do with release and letting go. So we begin this journey into that with the shaman of birth, who happens to be in your first house, and we're looking at um, we're looking at your identity. We're looking at how you identify and how you show up to the world, how you show up to the world. Um, and happy birthday, happy birthday to you. For those of you that are born during this first trimester happening between the 23rd, and even those that are born on the 21st or around that time, because the autumn equinox, the equinoxes, um and the solstices, they tend to shift days. They're not always the 23rd. It's not always going to be the 23rd to the 3rd of October. And so, anyone born around, if you're born before, if you're born before um, September 23rd, but you're still born in the time of Libra, that's very possible. It's not the same exact day all year round. It can be the 21st, for example. So happy birthday to you if you happen to be born sometime a little before, if you happen to be a Libra born sometime before the 23rd of September. So anyhow, we're looking at the birth of autumn. We're looking at the birth of the night. And what we're really exploring here is how to create balance. The West has a lot to do with transitioning back to the womb. And so transitioning out of the light and back to the womb. And when you look at the West, it's the evening uh, period of the day. The sun is setting in the West. This is the afternoon. This is the evening period. This is the twilight hours of the evening going to dusk, when the last light of the day um, leaves middle world. And so, you know, Libra begins that period. Libra happens to be that time in the twilight hours, and so there happens to be this sort of communication, or this partnership that's happening at that time, between the day and the night, because the moon is coming to fill the sky with night, and the sun is going to slumber for the night. So we're following the sun to sleep. We're following, just as the sun goes to retire, so do we go to retire in the West, right? Um, but that happens to be your time of birth. That happens to be your wake up time. That happens to be your time of you're just getting started when you're in the West. You're just getting started when you're in the West. You're just getting started when in the evening hours. That's like your peak time. That's like your time to come out and say hello right there. In a manner of speaking, because Libra rules the twilight evening hours, and also rules it initiates, and therefore rules that it's the foundation behind the West energies. So Libra is very important for initiating that. Libra has the experience, if you will, to understand the um, the sacredness of night, and understand the sacredness of letting go, and understanding the sacredness of release. This is a very inward journey that we're beginning here in the West. When we look at the shaman of birth, what we're really looking at are how two polar opposite energies come together to create a product of love. And that can show up as the conscious and the unconscious self. So the masculine representing the conscious, the feminine representing the unconscious. We can look at intellect versus emotion. We can look at aggressiveness versus passiveness. We can look at so many different polar opposites, spiritual versus physical, or vice versa. There's so many polar opposites with these two, and um, the idea is that what we're really trying to do is bring them together. How I think of these two is, it's like the sun and the moon. The male energy represents the sun, while the masculine energy, the feminine energy, excuse me, she represents the moon. And so we're looking at how, when these two energies come together, they are electric, and they create a product of love, because they come together, in partnership and in marriage. And that product of love can be anything. It can be starting a business. It can be the idea of starting the business. It can be the idea of having a child or starting a family. Because this card is in your first house, definitely, obviously you're Libra, so there's that idea of partnership and marriage that is always at the forefront of your mind. But what I would like to encourage you about, my dear Libra, is that these two have a lot to do with your conscious and your unconscious forces. Because very oftentimes, our unconscious energy is what attracts us to our mate, if you will. Um, because what we're really marrying is some deeper, more unconscious part of ourselves. That which we are attracted to, that which turns us on, that which gets us going, that which makes us say yes, there's some part of that is of ourselves, that is in this person that we find on the outside. So the shaman of birth here is really asking you to build a partnership and a marriage, not just with your conscious self, but with your unconscious self, not just with your higher conscious, but with your subconscious, not just with your mental, but with your emotional, not just with your spiritual, but with your physical, and vice versa, not just with your physical, but also with your spiritual. As we go into the West, the West energy tends to look at emotional and spiritual forces, tends to look at, and both of those forces are quite invisible. They're not very visible forces. They are forces that are quite behind the scenes. And it all starts with a vision or an idea, a dream. Um, um, that's where it starts. It all starts that way. It starts with a feeling, an emotion, something that you pick up. Psychic energy happens in the West. And so we're really looking at that communication between the invisible realities and the visible realities. Um, and we're looking at communicating between the two, the communication, the partnership that happens between the two. We're looking at the partnership that happens between the visible and the invisible realities. Both of them are very real. One leads on the back end while the other one leads in the front end. Feminine energy tends to lead on the back end. Masculine energy tends to lead on the front end. Make no mistake, just because feminine energy, not talking about man versus woman, talking about feminine energy versus masculine energy, feminine energy tends to work on the back end, tends to be the supportive leader, the leader that works behind the scenes. Masculine energy tends to work on the forefront, tends to do all the front man things. This is what people see. They tend to be the ones that are in the spotlight and showing up, and the feminine energy tends to be the one that leads behind the scenes, doesn't look for recognition, doesn't need recognition. The masculine energy ends up getting recognition anyway because it's at the forefront anyhow. Do you understand? So whether it wants recognition or realization or to be the center of attention or not, it's going to be because it can't help but to be at the front end. That's masculine energy right there. Air and fire are masculine energies. Water, earth, feminine energies. Do you notice water, the energy in itself, it supports life, right? It works in the back end. You see water as in ponds and lakes, but unless you happen to live along a pond or a lake, do you see it? Water is on the inside of the earth. Earth energy tends to be all around us, and yet we barely notice it. And yet, without earth energy, how do we drive? How do we walk? How do we ride our bicycles? How do we build things? You know what I mean? But we don't really give it any recognition. We just use it for what we need it to do, and you know what I mean? But that's how water and earth energy are versus air and fire energy. Fire energy is very inspirational, very aggressive, very assertive, very go-getter. Air energy is very direct and very thoughtful and very erratic and mercurial, shape shifting, you know, um, and tricksy. It likes to play tricks. Air and fire energy are very externalized forces, while feminine energy, water and earth, are very internalized forces. So really what we're looking at is we're marrying our inner strength with our outer strength. We're marrying that externalized force with the internalized force. And so that's very different from creating an external relationship. You got to get that. If for those of you who are single and looking, okay, are single, whether you're single or looking or not, we can all learn from the Libra energy in itself that it's really about creating that marriage and that relationship with the inner self. That conscious self needs to create a marriage and a relationship with the inner self. And when the outer, more externalized self can create a marriage and a relationship with the inner self, everything that is reflected outside, the peace, the harmony, the balance that we so strive for, comes naturally because we've created that already from within. You understand? So we live in a very superficial, materialistic world today, unfortunately, and where everything is always like everything is always at face value. Libra energy is part of the West triad, which means it's part of the elements of water, even though it's an air sign. So it's working with invisible energies. It's working with emotions, and it's working with the spiritual energies. The masculine side tends to work with the physical energies, and the thought energies, and in the way of Masculine energy tends to take a look at what is externalized. Feminine energy tends to take a look at what is internalized. So these forces being married to one another. What really has to happen here is that um, you have to really do your best, if you will, to create a sort of a matrimony of make vows, marry yourself, fall in love with yourself, not just the conscious self, but the deeper inner self. You got to learn how to fall in love with that deeper inner unconscious side of you, that side of yourself that even though you may want to do something, that inner you has maybe different direction that it's choosing to go in a different agenda. You've got a conscious agenda, but then always something ends up happening. That's the unconscious force attracting and making other things happening, even though you're consciously wanting to make such and so happen. You got to learn to fall in love with that. You got to learn to to create a marriage with that. Libra opens us up. Libra opens us up by meditation. Libra opens us up by teaching us to go within and to meditate and to still the mind, to be open to the forces that are within, to still the mind and to hear the voice, to hear the feelings and and the spiritual energies that are behind the black curtain, behind the night, within the night. Libra really teaches us and shows us how to communicate with those energies. It's actually a very shamanic energy. Um, and very peacemaking and very much about balance and loving energy. That's Libra right there for sure. Libra teaches us to disengage and detach from yesterday, from who we've been, so that we can prepare ourselves to get ready for who we're becoming. Who we've been has already passed, no longer matters no more. It's now all about who we're becoming. However, because this energy is in your first house, we're starting a whole new you here. We're looking at a whole new you. We're looking at a whole new, like, you are reborn. This is your time. This is the medicine that you as a Libra that you share with the world. You understand your divine purpose. Your new self has a lot to do with how the inner and outer balance. And actually at this time, because the Aries energy here is actually in opposition. Both of them actually have twilight hours. One is the morning twilight, the other one is the evening twilight. And so there's still the twilight energy going on here, although it's switched sides, because this side is the night taking over the day, and this side is the day taking over the night. So it switched sides, which does bring about a bit of opposition and discomfort and makes things a little bit uncomfortable, because Libra energy in itself is more of an internalized energy than it is an externalized energy. But this is still a great time for you to celebrate yourself. This is still a great time for you to celebrate you and to learn how to come into yourself in a good way. Um, so really creating that balance, realizing that I am you and you are me, and the relationship, although I am independent, the union in itself, because Aries looks for independence, right? And Libra looks at partnership. Um, on a different level. I'm trying to say this in the right way, but you know how it's like the many one. Well, here you can sort of look at it as the partnership one. The partnership is one entity. The marriage is one entity. This is what Libra looks at. How a partnership, you become one. You become of one of mind, body, and soul. And so really learning how to sort of integrate that with the Aries energy, there can be a lot of conflict there. But with practice and with effort and with time, these conflicts, because Aries teaches you, on the other hand, how to be one just with yourself versus being one within a partnership. So there is that balance that has to happen too. A balance that has to happen, that that you have yourselves singularly, and then you have, your partnership that sits in the middle of all of that, where that partnership is one entity that is created by the two, but still yet having your own independence and being able to do your own thing. Libra tends to conquer when Libra creates balance and harmony and peace in its world. And so really going back to what we were speaking about earlier, the way that you get to do that, Libra, is by creating balance, peace, and harmony with your inner self. So there's never going to be a you know, we often make the mistake of trying to create that partnership and marriage and balance and peace and harmony in the externalized world without first creating it in our internalized world, you see. And it's nobody's fault. Well, I mean, it's the world that we live in today. It's the world that we live in today that we continue to only to blind ourselves to the other side. That's the world that we live in today. But thankfully, more and more, more and more information and realization is starting to come to the forefront as far as the spiritual realm and how it exists. Because Libra, I believe, is really good at how to communicate with the spiritual realm. Because if anything, if you're going to, in order for you to communicate with the spiritual realm, you have to be willing to first detach and become a clean, clear slate, which talks about meditation. And we got to look at inner balance and inner peace and harmony, in order to have that. That's where it all starts. It all starts with inner balance and peace and harmony. That has to come from within. Even your externalized world without, if you are going to have a peaceful, balanced, harmonious relationship outside of yourself, you have to stop looking outside of yourself to create it. You've got to deal with what's inside of yourself. And if you're dealing with a lot of inner turmoil, right now I say that I'm looking at this because I'm looking at a foot that talks about fear of being of letting go. This crystal foot here, I'm taking a look at fear of letting go. And I'm also taking a look at how there are some intrusive energies around you right now. Some unbeneficial, intrusive energies that may be causing sickness and illness, that may be holding your spirit down, keeping you from being able to move in the direction that you'd like to go. The foot is backwards, basically, which to me represents fear, and it represents doubt, and it represents stagnation, but this is a spiritual foot, and there's a need to progress. There's a need to progress. And we're looking at holding back. We're looking at resistance. We're looking at, I don't wanna, I don't wanna, I don't wanna, I don't wanna. We're also looking at being ungrounded here. Ungrounded in the sense that, when you've got your head so far deep in the ground that you're unable to be balanced. So we're looking at an imbalanced, ungrounding imbalance because the foot is upside down. So you can literally imagine your body being upside down, which in itself makes you ungrounded, Things are flipped upside down to me in your life right now, Libra. But I see you trying to go for it at the same time. I see you trying to listen to your instincts and your inner passions and your inner drive, and I see you going for it at the same time. However, there are some things that need to be cleansed. There are some burdens that need to be released from you right now. There are some burdens that need to be cleansed and released. And yeah, there are some definite burdens that need to be cleansed and released. And it may be really time for you to go inward, to go into the womb. This is your time to go into the womb right now, Libra, because this bone talks about going into the cave. So this is your time of being a hermit, but there might be some fear of that here. I'm seeing there's fear of that. Either you fear solitude, Either you feel darkness, either you fear loneliness, but there's some sort of fear of going into the womb, of going into the cave, of being just with yourself, of being inside of that dark force. There's fear happening there, going into the womb of the mother. And I mean, there's a lot of fear with going into the womb of the mother. It's common these days, unfortunately, for us to fear going into the womb of the mother. You know, there's so many traditions, there's so many thought forms, so many belief systems that we pick up as to why, this is just. But you've got to be willing to take these energies and to transmute them into fuel. That's what this bone is about. You've got to be willing to take these energies, transmute them into fuel. You know, really allow yourself to burn away the fear, the doubt, any thought forms and belief systems that may be getting in your way. Any thought forms and belief systems that may be getting in your way. This is your season, Libra. So your season is a very introspective season. Just so you know, it's very reflective. It's very introspective. It has a lot to do with loss. It has a lot to do with pain and sorrow. And this is your season. This is your power. And if you can tap into that power of the West, the power of the West is a power of feeling, is a power of spirituality, power of emotion. The power of the West is a power of going within, contemplation, Zen, meditation, learning how to communicate with the other side, learning to be in communication with the other side. We're going, like I said, this is the twilight hours. That's your power. How to be in relationship with the twilight hours, that balance and that harmonious space between the day and the night. And you've got twilight evening coming into twilight. This is your time right now. This is your season. This is your new beginning. This is your new beginning. And the best way for you to be able to begin that new beginning is by stepping into your power, by choosing to say yes and step into your power. Step into your power as a Libra. Step into that Libra energy and really give yourself permission to go within and to close your eyes and to know that it is okay. And if there are fears about that, be willing to combat those fears. Be willing to combat those fears and to work through them. You don't have to ignore them. You don't have to act as if they don't exist, but acknowledge them, work through them, understand where they're coming from, understand the root situation behind that. I see a lot of north energy here. You see the north energy. And all three of them, to me, say that there's some sort of root issue that's keeping you from moving forward. There's a root issue here. The north, Capricorn. The north represents your root chakra. The north represents that time of going into the womb. This is Capricorn right here. Which talks about a new year that is beginning. But just like feminine, we talked about earlier how feminine energy works on the background while masculine energy works in the forefront. The new year tends to begin somewhere around here. The reason for that is because the seeds are being incubated and preserved at this time. All of the feathers have fallen away, the leaves have fallen away, the seeds have fallen onto the ground, and now snow in the north in the winter time covers the ground, and everything is being incubated and hibernating and preserved. So the new year actually begins here within the womb. But once again, masculine energy, this is the cardinal first house because it is what we see. But the 10th house tends to actually be the first house. I know that's very confusing. I know that can sound very confusing, but it's just like having a baby. The first house is when the baby is born. The 10th house is when the baby is conceived. So it all starts within the womb. And in fact, before that, the West is where we have the dream being conceived in the spiritual and emotional realm. So before it becomes physical, it always becomes spiritual and emotional first. So, in a lot of ways, the West is actually the beginning of a new year, because first it's an idea, it's a dream, it's a vision, it's an image, it's a feeling that you get, you know, this feeling that won't go away, that I really want to do this, and then working off of that feeling, and then working off of these inner thoughts, you know. Libra's energy tends to be very secretive. There tends to be um an ulterior motive behind what Libra does. Libra is more secretive. I would look at Libra like a rogue or an assassin. Very secretive energy, versus Aries, that is like everything out in the open. Libra tends to be more secretive, has more going on, and they can be very intellectual and smart about how they work behind the scenes. And so we're looking at these motives. It all begins here, energetically, spiritually, emotionally. It all begins with the idea of feeling that you have, and the result, the birth of that feeling, that idea happens here. But the incubation, the hibernation, happens here all along the north. So there are some definite fears here. However, the Mars stone here asks you to really just get aggressive about it, and just go for the gusto, and just go for it. Just go all out, no matter what. Just get into it. Go for it, no matter what. I don't mean to say it in this kind of insensitive way, but the Mars energy is like, don't be a sissy. You know what I mean? Like the Mars energy is like, don't be scared. Don't be a scaredy pants. Go for what you want. Go full force. Go for it. You know what I mean? Just get in there and do it. You got to go all in. You got to be all in. Um, you got to be all in. And what I see that you need to be all in about is the cleansing period, this cleansing here, because this is your cleansing stone here. So the Mars energy is asking you to clear space, is asking you to cleanse and clear space, which means that you've got to free yourself from any burden or any heaviness that's going on inside of yourself. If there's any heaviness going on inside of yourself right now, if you feel emotional heaviness, if it's a matter of not acknowledging certain feelings, ignoring certain feelings because you only want things to look peaceful and balanced and harmonious on the outside, so you ignore certain feelings. But it causes emotional heaviness inside of yourself doing that, you understand? And so the Mars energy is really asking you, is really driven to free you from those burdens, to deliver you from the sorrow and the pain and any despair, any heaviness that you have going on in your life right now. The Mars energy is really trying to get you to just say, F it, I'm going to do it. I'm going, I'm all in, I'm all about it. I'm getting aggressive about this. I no longer want to be a victim to it. I no longer want to carry this energy inside of myself. I'm letting it go. I'm getting it out. I'm no longer going to be afraid. Today I'm going to be brave. And so the Mars energy is really like that. It's like, today I'm going to be brave. Today I'm going to do it. And I know that there may be conflict and adversity, but you will pull through. You will, because you'll be brave and you'll be courageous and you'll fight your way through it. But there's this fear of going into the darkness. Then I see, lots of conflict going on here that maybe caused the fear, or maybe caused the density. Lots of emotional conflict maybe, that maybe caused the density, and sort of beginning this transition here, into getting to the truth, into getting to a space that, is above and beyond, any obscurity or obstruction of self, because we often stop ourselves from being able to reach our destination, to reach our goals, to reach what we want to do with our own lives. So, really, really, getting beyond that, the shaman of birth, understanding that the birth actually happens on a spiritual and emotional and unconscious level, unconscious, spiritual, emotional, before it happens on the physical and the mental level. It happens unconsciously before it happens consciously. The conscious is usually the last one to know about it. The foundation is usually the first one to know. The foundation is usually that secretive force. Let's talk about the moon. Let's talk about grandmother moon. Okay, let's talk about why is she a grandmother moon. She knows how to midwife, which means that she knows how to have babies. She's a spiritual mother. Grandmother moon is the spiritual mom, whereas earth mother is the physical mom. Grandmother moon is the spiritual mom. You understand? So um we're looking at um we're looking at things that happen in the dream time and in the emotional and spirit realm, before they end up happening in the mental and physical. Before things get mental and physical, they get emotional and spiritual first. Spiritual being the invisible forces. We're talking about invisible forces versus visible forces. Before they become visible, they're invisible. But without that invisible force working its way into visibility, there would be nothing to be visible about. It's the mother energy. It's the feminine energy, that actually works behind the scenes, and is the leader behind the scenes. Doesn't look for recognition, but it is the back energy that helps us to be who we are. Think about the role of a queen, versus the role of a king. A king might be in the forefront making everything happen, but the queen is the support. Without the queen, the king has no backbone. Without the queen, the king does not have the king cannot have a child. It cannot carry on its lineage. Without the king has nothing to encourage and inspire him to go out into the world and inspire other people. So you understand? So the feminine energy here is what inspires the masculine energy to go out into the world and do what it needs to do. So there's that balance going on here. And it's really just a matter of transmuting any doubt, any fear, any burden. Sometimes we create a lot of burden, especially when we have partnership. We tend to sacrifice ourselves, right? We tend to sacrifice ourselves in order to make the partnership a happy one, but we end up making ourselves unhappy in the process. It tends to happen a lot in relationships these days. So I really want to remind you to let go of the need to sacrifice yourself. Because if you're sacrificing yourself and falling in love with your invisible force are two different things. Because when you fall in love and you marry your invisible force, that's going to reflect outside of yourself. You're going to end up marrying what's outside of yourself by marrying that invisible force and falling in love with it. And learning to live as if that invisible force was there with you. What would this invisible force say? What would it do? How would it be? What would it tell you? How do you find the balance? Learning to live in balance with your inner self, with the shadow invisible self, with your shadow self. Learning to live in balance with your shadow self. You know? So so that's your medicine. Overall, things are looking pretty good. Once again, happy birthday. And, I really do hope that you're able to find the proper balance here between the mental and the emotional, between your mind and your feelings, so that you can be able to move into dark places and feel safe there. Because feelings work with dark spaces, spirit works with dark spaces, right? So you really want to be able to move there, unafraid and unashamed. So we've got to get this turned around. I believe that you can do it, Libra. I do believe that you can get this turned around and that we can go forward pure. So there's some dirty things. There's some energies here that need to be cleared first before we can make that happen. So please like and subscribe if you happen to enjoy this reading. Um, I'm Medicine, and of course, I'm always here to help. I love you guys very much. I thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in the next read. Ta ta.